Hi, this is Joanne, and this video is for parents and teachers in the Diocese, this great Diocese of Owensboro, on an introduction to what it means to be made in the image of God as we try to help our children appreciate that term and the ramifications of it. Many of the things that are discussed in this video are not discussed in the K through 6 program, but this video is attempting to go bigger and broader to help you understand how big and broad this topic is. And because God is infinite, we could go on a long time. But here we go. Imago Dei. Imago Dei is on the cover. Teachers sometimes when they are teaching class, Imago Dei is Latin for image of God. Teachers sometimes when they're teaching class will draw a person on the board, and that person's name is always Imago Dei, because you're trying to view every person is Imago Dei. That's kind of their secret name. They're made in the image of God. So a little bit about what we will be talking about today. You will hear in different places. A main place that you might hear a lot of these terms will be in the theology of the body. Many of you know, that theology of the body came from John Paul II's Angelus addresses in the window, right over here in the window, and Angelus addresses are still happening. That's theology of the body, but we will be integrating that, but this program is not theology of the body, it's bigger. John Paul II did also write some other things before he was Pope, love and responsibility and the acting person. If you find any of this interesting about going further into what it means, the human person, okay, and the different elements, I encourage you to chew on some of these things that are written in this work. So we are not going to be covering that today. I encourage you, if you have never heard of it, don't understand it, if you think it's Catholic sex ed, which is wrong, it is a gospel approach to view of self and relationships and God, because we are made in the image of God, right? And what does that say? So, if you don't know about it, please Google it, look it up. There we have it. All right, so we're going to move on. Imago Dei, being made in the image of God, is a matter of revelation. It's a matter of faith. There are things that we cannot come to by reason alone. The Trinity, like, we did not make that up. It was revealed to us. So in the image of God, just as a refresher course, things are revealed to us. Catholics, we believe that revelation, divine revelation, comes through scripture and tradition as guarded by the magisterium, the church. Remember, the church doesn't create truth. It can't take away truth. It can't change truth. The truths of the church remain consistent, all right? Even though the people in the church don't or are corrupt, we have confidence in the magisterium to guard the deposit of faith, those truths found. And what they would do is say, this policy is not compatible with our understanding of blank. Okay, there we have it. This is the scripture passage. The first time being made in the image of God is brought up. You are all familiar with it if you could look at it right now. The image of God is mentioned later on, again, in Scripture, in a few wisdom literature and a few other places. This is the first place in Genesis that it's mentioned. And while we're talking about that, reminder, it's going to come up in our program in the primary grades. We refer to Adam and Eve matter-of-factly, okay? But it's going to happen that the questions are going to come up about how could this be for real? And sometimes adults get scared because they think, well, I don't know, we just got to believe it, or something like that. The Catholic Church is 100% open to science. Okay, faith and science are completely compatible. It also believes reading scripture intelligently, knowing that it is inerrant and inspired, but also knowing that it was written in a certain time, in a certain literary genre, with a certain language, and to sift through all that. And the truths that the church teaches from these things are basic. So what do we really learn maybe from the Genesis story? I call them non-negotiables, but there are truths that the church teaches, okay? That God is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, eternal, infinite. He created everything out of nothing, all right? God created mankind in his image and infused into him a unique soul that is immortal, immaterial, and immortal, spiritual. That God is Trinity. That God created everything, not just us, but the world with order, design, and purpose. He doesn't make mistakes. That God gave mankind a free will, that mankind used that free will to choose to separate from God by being selfish, that God permits consequences of our choices while still loving us, okay? And that we bear the effects of the choices of those that have gone before us. And we call the original choice original sin. That's the name that we have given it, okay? But that idea that it's kind of like original sin is a hard thing to understand. It's not a sin that we commit, but we bear the wounded effects of it. Kind of like a child, infinitely loved by both parents, who went through an amicable divorce, okay? The child is infinitely loved by the parents, but still leaves the homework over at dad's house. So that child is still bearing the effects of that, if that makes sense, as we do and continue to do. And that no matter what, God always loves us, no matter what, and desires communion with us. Another important truth is that everything is God's initiative. This is an understanding of grace that's very deep, but it's not up to us. As a matter of fact, the more we let go, God can work, says St. Paul. So being made in God's image is not anything that we do, all right, or earn. Everything is a grace, and everything is in God's initiative. This is our theology of grace in this creation. You see this image in Hobby Lobby or wherever a lot. God's hand, which is showing power and strength and life, okay? And then we have Adam's hand, which is lifeless, unless it is given life by God. So that is our understanding of grace and things as we move forward. All right, so image of God, let's just unpack that term. It's going to get a little complicated, and I'm only touching on some things just to help remind us how big and important and that it is. Okay, so this is probably not a good imagery, but I'm trying to figure out a way to help explain that how we are made in the image. We are not clones of God. We are not God, okay? We are not the source of truth, even though we tend to think we are. Our opinion is right. We don't earn the love of God. So it's kind of like a fossil imprint, all right? Someone once said, and I don't know where I've heard it, but we have God-shaped holes in our hearts. We are kind of like that impression that only made in such a way that only God can fill it correctly. All right. And there are many aspects of that. So when we study fossils, in a sense, we can understand what created that, through the physical attributes, through and again, we also just can't study that one just ourselves. We are best understood and actually our better selves and in a better image of God in relation with others. And so we'll get there. All right. This is a little commercial. This is a textbook that I read because it's easy reading. And chapter 9 in this textbook, Faith, Science, and Reason by Christopher Baglow, talks about the various elements in an easy way on what it means to be made in the image of God. Okay, so some of the things that will be discussed here, I have taken from that book, especially the parts on our rationality. All right, so when we want to study what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God, it's a matter of faith. So then we look at what science, if we're made in the image of how are we made, right? Then we use our reason. And then we come to conclusions about who God is and thus why we were made. So Thomas Aquinas talked about the difference of a vestige and an image. A vestige is a trace of something, okay? And all creations, including ourselves, are still vestiges of the Creator. An image is the representation, kind of like a self-portrait. My fossil image was probably not good, but anyway, it's the best way I could think of right now to understand it. So to understand God, we have to understand ourselves. And how do we understand ourselves? That's by looking at everything, at every angle. And it's a constantly growing thing. We go back to the creation account, and we know that we are physical, okay? We're tangible, and we believe that, symbolized through God's breath, that our life and our who we are as human beings is purposely given by God, okay? And so here we realize that we are a union, and this is talked about in the terms, a union of body and soul. And that is a very Catholic understanding of it. A lot of times different people, places, whatever, might have a dualistic approach where those are fighting against each other, or one is primarily one and not the other. We believe we're a composite of body and soul. And that is one way that we image God, okay, in this unity that we have. When we talk about the soul, we use the term faculties of the soul. That's a philosophical term. It really means powers or parts of the soul. And the parts of the soul have been broken down for millennia, okay? We talk mostly, and what we only discuss in this program, the role of the intellect, the reason, thinking, free will in its simplest form, choice, choosing. And we talk about, we don't mention the word appetitive or our appetites, even though that's the philosophical term, but our passions, that's the word used in the Catechism for our emotions and our feelings. And we intertwine those terms throughout the K through 6 program. But human beings have a rational soul. And this is one of the ways which we image God. It is through our reason. Reason is something that has many elements in it. But its main purpose and desire and existence is to come to know the truth. It's across the board, right? And what is truth? Who is truth, right? God is truth. And so God has built us with this reasonable hole in our hearts that only truth He can fill. Then, because we have the capacity for reason, And we also have a free will, which we're going to discuss a little later on too, where we can choose and make a choice. And in that, because love is a choice, in that we also image God. So reason and free will are other ways we image God. Going back to our rationality, I'm only going to skim on it. It's going to come up, you know, how our favorite pets, they're loving, they can love and know, but they cannot love and know in the same way that we can. The popular image of this is the train. You have a dog that sees the train, you have an Aborigine that's never seen a train and sees a train for the first time, and then you have the civilized person who sees a train and understands its essence and its makeup and its purpose and so on and so forth. The Aborigine, when it first sees it, doesn't understand it, but can. Okay, he can ask the questions. The dog has never been capable of understanding the essence and the purpose of the train. The dog will still bark every day that it comes for whatever reason, or run away or whatever. So there are the rational nature of us is different, and specifically designed. Is designed in a lot of ways. These are, you can look at these right here, and each dimension of our rationality gives us a new dimension and understanding of God. For instance, being able to understand the abstract and universal concepts of beauty, justice, that we can know that there is truth, and we can recognize falsehoods, and that we can be certain that truth is unchanging, right? We can even understand ourselves. Self-reflect, okay, our self-possession, and in such a way that we can give of ourselves deliberately for the good of the other. Augustine, who lived in the 4th century-ish in Africa, just to show you, people have been discussing the role of our imaging God, okay, the role of our intellect and free will. And Augustine probably thought the most simplistic analogy of the Trinity and how we image God. And I look at it, I think there's nothing simplistic about it. But Augustine in De Trinitate, one of his things that he wrote, gave expression to the analogy of the Trinity, in which the unity of essence is likened to the rational part of the human soul, composed as it is of the mind and the knowledge by which it knows itself, and the love by which it loves itself. It's complicated to me. So our reason has so many dimensions to it, and in each one, it's a carved out place that the truth of God can fill. All right. Since we can know things, our reason can know things as they are in themselves, including ourselves, and their relationship to goodness, okay, and makes those judgments. It can consider actions, okay, and then perform an action. And this ability to act or not act is called freedom. And that is actually a definition in the Catechism too. Freedom in our free will, okay, as mentioned before. In the program, we just discuss it as we have choices to make in freedom, okay? And then our reason, we need to think before we act, is basically what we say, right? But our reason needs to govern our choices, not necessarily our feelings. Can you imagine if we always acted on just our feelings? And anyway, we're not going to go there now. All right. A reminder, we go about this term in the terms, but just a reminder that love, the agape love, the highest form of love, is an act of the will and not the emotions, okay? Fuzzy-wuzzy love is that kind of attraction can be a type of love. In English, we don't make those distinctions. And attraction is good, it's fine, but the highest form of love is when you make a choice for the other. usually it involves some kind of sacrifice, willing the good of the other. And that kind of love is hard, to will the good of the other. It doesn't naturally flow off the tongue. You might have to have them memorize it until it sinks in. And we still have to have it sink in too. So that is when we talk about love here, we're talking about choosing what is best for the other as other. All right. So because human beings are capable of reason, they're capable of reason, human beings are capable of freedom, they're capable of love. Okay? So now we see that body and soul are a way to image God. We see reason and free will, a way to image God. And there's so much more. Okay. A matter of faith, we know that God is Trinity. Okay, so then we might go backwards and say, well, if God is Trinity, which we are still unpacking, God is a relationship in himself. He is communion. So how are we like that? Okay, goes both ways. How are we like that? Scripture says we are like that in our gender. Male and female, he created them. And this is an important part of the theology of the body, okay? Appreciating our identity as God made us, and also the idea of complementarity, all right? We understand that interdependence, complementarity, equal in dignity, but the differences are what help us to be in relationship. And this is not just in the male and female, but it is in society and very easy to see in the classroom. Therefore, you know, yeah. So God is a relationship, and we're made for relationship. Religion is not about rules, it's about relationship. All of moral theology is about relationship. So that having been said, we can learn things. We see that relationship in play in anthropology, which we're going to be going to in a minute. But so our capacity for relationships, and in our relationships, we further image God, because God is love. He made us in love for love. So our dignity, again, rests in the fact that we are in the image of God. Nothing can take that away. It actually is hard for students to, if they don't understand this right away, and you say Hitler was made in the image and likeness of God, they'll be like, no. And the answer is yes, because even our choices, okay, can't take away someone's dignity. It is, again, in all the different grade levels, we talk about love, and the highest form of love is a choice, okay? And that using another, being selfish in any kind of way, and you can see that in Catholic social teaching and business practices in so many ways, is the opposite of love. And that's kind of spoken simply in the program. So, love is a choice for communion, using our free will. Sin is described in our program as a choice for self, or a choice that harms our relationship with God. Because again, it's not about rules, even though kids love rules. It's really about relationship. Okay, you've seen this before, and you might have heard all this before, but just in case you haven't, I think it's really cool, and we're going to talk about it again. Michelangelo's creation of Adam in the Sistine Chapel. We already mentioned over here the theology of grace in the hands. And of course, we see the Father here, and then we see Adam here, right? And we see Eve here. Okay, one of the things that there's a lot of points that we can make about this. We're not going to belabor it. But Adam and Eve, oh, bad picture, can see each other through the Father's eyes. That's important, how we view others, okay? And that God goal perspective. What I'm like about this, and why I'm talking about it now, is the fact that as we know, our reason and our free will, which helps us love, is a way we image God. And Michelangelo is like, this is not a new concept. And this, if you look it up, you just Google brain or neurology and Sistine Chapel, you are going to get different drawings of how Michelangelo designed this thing behind God to be both a brain and a heart. And I think that's pretty cool because we image God in our mind and in how we love, and in the mind and heart of God from all eternity, He has loved us because He created us and desires communion with us. So that's pretty cool. So we image God by being male and female in our differences, our body and soul unity, our reason and free will, are capable of agape love, and we're designed distinctly on purpose like this. Okay. But because God is infinite, there are infinite ways of discovering more. And so one of the ways we can come to know about God is by using our reason. And if we are made in the image and likeness of God, and the more we understand about ourselves, the more we understand about God and how God made us. So we've looked at ourselves in those terms. What does anthropology teach us? And what does that teach us about God? Well, I'm only going to scratch the surface here, and this is pretty directly addressed in the 6th grade, not as much in the younger grades, just getting them ready to understand this concept. This analogy here is my analogy, so it might be completely wrong, but I like it. It's faith and reason. I like to consider as you put them together and you continue to spiral in your growth in your understanding. They each add to each other, and it just grows and grows and grows. And it's a mathematical sequence that goes on for infinity. So I like to think the one and the one here are faith and reason. And then the explosion happens. And if we continue to use those, we could go on for infinity. I bet you're hoping I don't do that right now. But anyway, so let's go back to the principle that we understand a few things now. We know that mankind is made in the image of God, that creation, all of creation, teaches us also something of God, okay? That God uses the physical, the world, reality, to communicate the spiritual, and that everything that is true goes back to God, who is truth. So we can start with the sciences, and maybe not with faith, and then reconnect the principles that we know. So in a sense, let's put on our goggles and kind of look at what science says, and then infuse our faith and say, that's why God did that. Okay? So one anthropological lesson that is concluded: through all cultures and times, there have been religion, right? The idea that reason alone, we know that there's a God, that this God is powerful, smart, and deserves worship. The idea of sacrifice also is involved in religions, whether it's in the Aztecs, even all the religions that existed at the time, same time as the Hebrew religion in the Old Testament, Abraham being asked to sacrifice his only son wasn't a foreign concept. But that idea of so why did God designed us this way? It seems that no matter where we are, when we are religious beings. And St. Augustine said it very well. You made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts will be restless until they rest in you. We know that, moving on, mankind is a social being, living in community. Nature is. And we're better. We need to live in community for lots of different reasons. And our differences is what makes that good. So sharing ourselves, helping others in society, okay, is another form that God designed us to have to be this way. So we have to be in relationship pretty much to, survive and become better. Creation is reproduced. and into a family. We are born into a family. And as a baby, the human being is actually the most incapable baby of taking care of themselves. You think about it in the animal kingdom. And it takes an adult to completely care for the infant. Okay, so caring for the vulnerable, what it means to care, the parenthood of God is mentioned, God as Father, or could a mother forget her child? That idea of that kind of love God has for us. Unconditional, undeserving, yeah. Self-preservation, we know, is a natural instinct, and so we all have it. Why do we have it? Well, our life, okay, is good, living. What does it mean to be living? And that God is living. That's pretty intense too. But the appreciation of our life and the source of life, we can gain from anthropology. Thomas Aquinas used the laws of physics and nature, again, using the natural world to come to his famous 5 proofs of God's existence. We can know just by looking at the natural world and come to reasonable conclusions about the existence of God and the perfection of God and the timelessness of God, because there had to be a first cause and a first mover, and so on and so forth. The idea of linguistic anthropology is very interesting when you study human beings' desire to communicate with others and the essence of oneself with another person, okay, on many different levels, and the complexity and the different languages that go into it. And what does this say, again, about God? Well, Scripture even uses that God is communication himself. He is the Word, okay? And that became flesh, all right, and dwelt among us. So how just even that concept ties into salvation history and literature, and you have to think about it for a while. And the last anthropological lesson that I'm going to use in this video is the idea that humans have the natural law written on their hearts, that humans make promises to each other, that humans value loyalty and fidelity in relationships, okay? When you use analogies about God, and they're always lacking because God's perfect, right? But the analogy that is used most in Scripture for God's love for us is the marriage covenant, that covenantal relationship. And seeing that as part of us, understanding that as part of God's through faith and reason, we get a deeper appreciation of the church, the bride of Christ, a deeper appreciation of Jesus's God becoming man, and that even as man, a profound appreciation of the source and summit of our faith in the Eucharist, what that is. Even church architecture is designed to look like a wedding tent, and that could be a whole other fun video, but this has been too long already. So I thank you for watching, if you've stayed through this. Hopefully you have grown in a kind of appreciation about this term, image of God, knowing that there's so much decades and millennia of thought and that goes into this, so that when we present it to our students, we realize it's a big deal. And it's something that we can't understand fully yet, but we do want to have, especially as from the beginning, an appreciation of this and communicate that to our students. for their sakes. All right, thanks again.